Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another developer Q&A video for Eve Echoes. For those of you who aren't familiar, each week NetEase, the developers of Eve Echoes, take 4 questions that have been posed to them by the community, answer those questions, and then post that response to their social media channels on Facebook and Twitter. Now, I know that not everyone uses social media. I, for one, will not touch Facebook with a 10-foot barge pole if I can help it. But Twitter I do use from time to time, so make sure you are following me at CPT Benzie, at Captain Benzie. Just unfortunately, the full at Captain Benzie has been stolen by someone in South Africa who hasn't used it in like 4 years. Anyway, Twitter verified when. Now, what they do is they take these questions, they post it to the Twitter account. I then download these, I read through them, and I give my own personal thoughts and opinions onto these as well. So this is an opinion piece. This may be 2021, but this is still the internet. So I do need to say these are my own opinions. You're entitled to your own. I'd love to hear yours politely worded in the comment section down below. So please make sure that you do let me know what you think on all these changes and suggestions in the comment section below. Also, hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill by now. Now, finally, if you've got a burning question you would like the developers to answer, make sure you click the link that I have pasted into the description of this video, where you can go to a Google document that the developers use to get those questions. And if your question is chosen, not only do you get an answer to it, not only do you get featured in one of my videos, you also win a month of Basic Omega, which I personally think is pretty cool. Anyway, let's have a look at this week's developer Q&A. This is for the week of the 25th to the 31st of August. My goodness, we're in September 2021 already. Where is my life going? Now, the first question, ratting in NS is becoming ridiculously easy. That's Nihilus Space. Even in Dead Space 10, as more and more players reach tier 10. Can we have more difficult challenges, stronger opponents, NPC guardians using shield field modules, etc.? Melos responds, "Thank you for your suggestion. We will consider adding this content in our new expansion or next balance update." Now, I've actually been talking with Melos a lot recently about balance and things as well, and this is something that he himself seems to have a big concern on. Now, there's a lot we can unpack here. Directly in the question here, can we have more difficult challenges with stronger opponents, NPC guardians? I think that would be amazing. I do think that you should start seeing guardianships in anomalies, in dead spaces, in storylines, in all of these, actually utilising the modules their ships were designed for. If you see something like a Hurricane Guardian in a Tech 10 anomaly, it should be using a shield field module. I think that if you're seeing like a Harbinger Guardian, it should be using an Armor Link module. I think that NPC command ships should be using command bursts, this kind of thing. And yes, that would definitely increase the challenge, as would actually making those modules do what they're supposed to do at full effectiveness. Right now, if you jump into an anomaly and you get hit by someone using, say, a Target Painter, a Nosferatu, a Stasis Web of Fire, or tracking disruptors, things like that, they don't work at full efficiency. When a rat is hitting you with one of those, it's not the same as if another player was hitting you with one, and I personally am of the opinion that it should be. It really should be. I don't think there should be a reason why rats hit for a lower efficiency than actual players do. I think if you go up against a fleet of NPCs, it should feel like going up against a fleet of players. I think that in itself solves a lot of issues. One of the things I keep being told about people who are, like, oh, well, I can't do scanning, I can't do low-sec encounters anymore because scanning's now a thing. I want more difficult content. People are after the difficult content. It's there. You just got to actually give it to them. I think as well we have another side of this, that ultimately when it comes down to it, that would then require the developers to go in and actually tweak some of these encounters and anomalies. You'd probably need fewer ships in some of the lower ones, for example. Just to sort of balance that and make sure that it's not overwhelming for, new players early on to go up against a fleet of 8 ships that are basically all being flown by other players. That I get would be a bit much, but it just requires a little bit of tweaking. I do think top tier content should be difficult. Absolutely. I also agree with whoever's asking this question. I think that Nihilus Space and Dead Spaces and all that kind of things are becoming ridiculously easy. And my reasoning for this, a lot of people don't like it. I do not agree that battleships should be as powerful as they are. I think if you're flying in a anomaly, in a battleship, then you should struggle to hit any of the frigates. If I'm in an Angel large anomaly, for example, and I'm flying something like a Tempest or a Raven, I should really struggle, if not find it impossible, to hit the probe explorers, let alone the interceptors and things that you'd find in those anomalies. I think that genuinely battleships hit their targets entirely too reliably. I think that Tech 10 content should probably be based around fleets. I think that a Tech 10 small anomaly should be soloable. Medium, if you're, willing to risk it, should be a bit of a thing. But a Tech 10 large anomaly, I really think that battleships should not be able to solo these. And again, people then will tell me, but hang on a second, you're agreeing that you want more difficult content, and then you're saying that players shouldn't be able to... Yes, I believe that the smalls and the mediums should be more difficult, to the point that they become difficult for players to solo in general, and then the Tech 10 larges should be very difficult for a player to solo. I think a battleship should not be able to hit those smaller ships, and should require a destroyer, or at least a cruiser or a battle cruiser, alongside them in order to do that. And I think there's some really cool and interesting ways that you could do that. I personally believe this is a twofold thing. On one, I do think that you should be making content more difficult, but on the other hand, making content more difficult and then just adding newer, better ships doesn't help anyone. You may not like the fact that I say that actually the content's plenty difficult, it's just that the ships are doing too much. If we nerfed battleships, you would find this content more difficult and more engaging. But people don't necessarily want that difficulty. Some people just want a ship they can sit AFK and just rat for hours, and that's not difficulty. We're gonna keep getting this situation. Every time you find a ship that can solo this kind of content on its own, then you lower the difficulty barrier. That's just how it is. I think the only way that we can realistically do this is by nerfing the ships that are currently soloing all this content on their own anyway. They should make it more difficult, make it more challenging that way. I don't know. That's my personal opinions. And as I said, I just think battleships are doing too much right now. I think that, if you want to do a Tech 10 large, you're not really going to do it in a cruiser, a destroyer, a frigate. You probably won't even do it in a battle cruiser particularly well. You will need to bring friends, and I don't see why battleships should be exempt from that. I think top tier should be difficult and should not be soloable. Next question. Is there a plan to add more structures for sovereignty? A structure similar to the pirate detection array, where it spawns extra anomalies but for mining belts, would be very useful. I do not think it should spawn condensed belts. I think moving those to end space was a good idea, which I agree. I think that was an excellent idea. But perhaps spawning higher tier belts, potentially allowing miners to find ores not normally available in system. That is interesting. That second part is the part that I like about this, and I'll come back to that in a second. Let's see what Nero says. We currently have no plans to add sovereignty structures with a mining bonus, but we will later consider allowing the Nihilist Divisive Capsuleer Outpost to discover higher yielding asteroid belts. That's cool. Now, there's a key point we need to discuss here. And that is that right now, mining is not a great way of making money. We had this discussion in Alliance chat, and some people seem to suggest that it's because miners are too safe. It's too easy to go mining, it's too safe to go nullsec mining, therefore, that's why ores don't cost much. And yes, if you're playing EVE Online, there are actually rats in belts as well. The mining belts will spawn rats that have to be dealt with. And I think in nullsec we could possibly add this in to add a little bit of extra challenge. And I can already hear miners complaining about this as I suggest it, so hear me out. The alternative point here is that, simply put, as miners are leveling up, going from a Venture to a Venture 2 to a Venture 3, all the way across to a Retriever, to a Procurer, and now to a Coveter and a Coveter 2, all that's really happening there is that they are harvesting more and more ore per hour. This means that there is more and more ore being added to the market, which increases the supply. Now, when supply of a product outstrips demand, basically you've got more of the product than you have of money to buy it, and money chasing it rather, so it devalues. That ore is not worth much because we are all sitting on massive stockpiles of it. I don't think that miners are too safe. I think that could be an interesting thing to look into in future, adding, very rare and lucrative mining belts that also have a bit of risk involved in them, so you want to go in there with a fleet and all of your retrievers with, 30 retrievers, 30 coveters or whatever, with their drones suddenly, and then suddenly a couple of rats spawn in. Those drones can rip them apart, or you just hire a friend to come in and sit with you and kill the rats. Those are cool ideas, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad way of doing it. What I think we need most of all, though, is not new ways to get more ores. We are already at a race to the bottom. The faster we harvest more ores, and the rarer those ores become, and we're finding, faster ways to harvest rarer ores, all you're going to do is create a surplus of those ores. What we need for fixing mining is for structures, things like these sovereignty structures, and the bigger ships to use more in the way of ore than they do of ISK. Right now, if you ask someone to build you a freighter, they've probably got all of the ore that they need. They just need the ISK to actually put it all into bake. That's the issue here. When we, in Void and Catskull, were going through and adding all these new pirate detection arrays and tax centers and things, we had all of the ores we needed. We just needed to rat for enough ISK to actually switch the oven on. I think if that was the other way around, if it was a case of we've gone, okay, right, well, we've actually depleted all of our ore reserves, we need to go out and mine more. Or in certain cases, now we need to go onto the market and actually buy ores. We need a way to increase the demand of ores. And I don't think that currently, looking at it at least, that the dreadnoughts or the carriers are going to fix that for us, because we know that those dreadnoughts and carriers are going to be using the same components that we already have for freighters, and those components don't require much in the way of ore compared to ISK. ISK is the bigger barrier. I would like to see that readdressed, where perhaps they halve the amount of ISK required to harvest, to build these modules and the components for these structures and the capital ships, but double the amount of each ore that is required to do so. We just need to find a way to increase demand for ore, not find new ways to race to the bottom. I like the idea here, and I really like the fact that, there's one here, normally, potentially allowing miners to find ores not normally available in system. That's interesting, because it adds a bit of choice. Do you mine in a system across and get the ore that you need, or do you put up a special thing in your system that means you don't have to make those additional jumps, but it costs you you have to actually build and anchor all of that? That's interesting, but I still think that before we touch anything else in regards to industry and mining, we need to increase the ore sinks. We need to have more ore consumed from the market. That will increase its value and therefore its price. Anyway, let's move on to question 3, because those two questions have taken quite a lot. Now, number 3, command burst ships were released in May, or maybe early June, it was May, but the industry command burst ships were left out. Is there a timeline for adding these ships? What we're looking at here is the Orca and the Porpoise. Now, I have actually done a video for this. Again, I will put a link in the description so you can have a look at what the Porpoise and the Orca actually are and how those go in. You can actually, I think it's when you hit tech level 9, and you get the little alert saying, congratulations, you've reached tech 9, here's the new ships you can fly. It actually lists the Porpoise, just there's no way to access it in the game files. I can create one on Fulmination, it exists there, I can literally make it and undock it, but again, the mining command bursts don't work, the things that it talks about. Anyway, is there a timeline for adding these ships? Now, Wilson says, we'd continue developing the command module of mining Foreman Link, but our focus for the second half of the year is developing small capital ships and related events. The releasing time of mining Foreman Link is not confirmed yet. Now, I'm still going to say here right now, this whole small capital ships thing being released, I think there are still way too many problems in the game that ultimately don't get fixed by adding these. I think there are things that we could be adding and fixing first before we get these ships. I don't think they add anything meaningful to Eve Echoes just yet. They don't fix any of the problems, and in fact, I think they add entirely new ones. I think they make some of the problems we already have even worse. But again, I could be wrong. I'm glad that people are happy that they're going to be able to fly dreadnoughts and carriers. I just personally see this as a very dangerous situation for the game. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't think that I am. Anyway, industry command burst ships. This is the same issue as we saw previously. Something like a Porpoise or an Orca gets a command burst where you can pop it, and everyone nearby gets a burst to their mining efficiency or how fast they circle and things like that. Again, it's still just a race to the bottom. If you start putting these in every single fleet, we're still harvesting more ore, and there's not much to do with that ore. We're still stockpiling it. I think this is a great thing to be added in the future. If you've watched the video where I talk about the Porpoise and the Orca, I am excited for them. I want them in the game. I just think we need massive ore sinks to be added first of all in order to actually necessitate them being in the game. I want them added, but we need to fix mining first. Finally then, Wargames. Can we get an option to repair our ship, including hull, if we warp back to spawn? Or an option to switch ships without having to get killed? Let it have a timer and not instant heal. Had a game today where I had 1 tick of hull left. Oof, yeah, been there, that's not fun. Now, Tailless Fox responds, and Tailless Fox obviously is the guy who is big on his PvP, does a lot of the stuff here to do with faction wargames, really great guy. He's very keen about getting this mode to the very best that it can be. Thank you for your suggestion, he says. We will consider adding a repair feature to the spawn point, like the healing springs in some MOBA games. And I actually really agree with this. I think this would be a really interesting way to do things in faction wargames. Right back at your spawn point, having a beacon there, basically having the spawn point full of logistics vessels. So when you arrive at the spawn point, your hull, your armor, and your shield actually start to regenerate. I don't like... Or do I? I'm not sure if I like the ability to switch ships at the spawn point. I think that could be interesting, but I think there's also a simple point of if you don't like the ship, just yeet it and, you know, go that way. As it stands, though, the healing part, I actually really like this, and I've actually suggested to Tailless Fox in the past, I would like to see each of the empires having an additional ship added. For Minmatar, add the Burst 2, for the Galente, add the Navitas 2, the Inquisitor 2, for the Amar Empire, and for the Caldari, give them the Bantam 2. I think it would be a nice introduction to people who want to try out logistics but are unsure. It would actually showcase those ships, because they don't get used at all at the moment. I would love to see faction wargames have both the logistics vessels, the ones I just named, plus the E-warships. Things like the Crucifier, the Maulus, the the Griffin, and the Vigil. I think those would also be a really interesting addition. Think of it, you undock a Vigil, you fly that at a target, and the Stealth Bomber finishes killing the Hauler, you then target painting one of the other ships, and that Stealth Bomber suddenly is able to do good damage against the thing that you're target painting because you've increased its signature radius. Or you're struggling against an enemy fleet, then your Crucifier comes in and hits them with tracking disruptors. I think showcasing E-War and logistics is something that we could really use in faction wargames, and I'm hoping that, if not necessarily this mode, that future modes will have that in as well. I think logistics would be the better way of doing this than a healing spring kind of effect, but I'm not against a healing spring either. I think that's an interesting idea, and it could make faction wargames just that little bit better. Yeah, it sucks to be sat with a tiny tick of hull left, and you've only got a shield booster or an armor repair, or some of them don't even have that, and you're just like, yeah, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to warp in and someone's going to pop me, and I've got the cooldown while I come back in. So I like the idea of healing. I would personally add logistics and E-warships, but yeah, I think you could kind of go either way. Anyway, folks, those are my thoughts and opinions on the 4 questions for this week's developer Q&A. Please do let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Keep it nice and polite. Have a good discussion with each other. I love watching some of you guys bouncing ideas off each other. And do, of course, come and join the Cat Skull Discord as well. We have channels where we talk about all this kind of stuff. We bounce ideas off each other, and I do watch that closely. I don't always get a chance to post it in the public channels. I try to when I can, but I do read it an awful lot. And a lot of that gets fed back to the developers as concepts and ideas of what we can do going forward to make this game even better. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching this all the way to the end, or rather listening to me ramble right to the final seconds. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.